Hey, welcome in everybody to the Sports Phanatic News Sportscast as we are here for our next episode covering the NHL Trade Deadline that just surpassed us and some moves made. One guy already scored that was moved from the NHL Trade Deadline.
Of
And then
course.
get into some NBA talk secondary here as that season ends now matched with the NHL's date. I think both are set for May 16th, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
At this current time. So they both are ending around the same time, both coming into the stretch run here. So we'll get into conversations about those two leagues. Our NFL talk will be a little bit more based on the draft and how we like the mock draft picks for our two respective teams of the both Pennsylvania teams, the Steelers and Eagles here, and then also what we think of the top 5 or top 10 overall, depending how much time we have, what we'll get into as an overall structure there. And then we'll wrap up with baseball again, being that's the new season that started. I figure it's always good to wrap up with the sport that's the newest in our minds and the one
There you
that everyone
go.
watching again. But first and foremost, Steel, how are you doing today? I don't think I have to introduce Steel anymore. He's obviously the Don, the leader of our SteelFlyers website. But how you doing this fine Tuesday or
Oh
Wednesday?
man, I'm telling you what, I'm ready to talk about sports. I'm ready to get into it, man. We had a great trade deadline show over on Off the Wall Hockey. We had everybody from the Steel Flyers Network was able to hop onto that show, and we gave you complete coverage from 10 o'clock until what? When did you guys log out? Like 5, I think.
Sometime after, I don't think it was that late. I think it was like after 4, but we were going to hop off, and then that Manther trade came.
Right. So
So that's the reason why we didn't.
But yeah, man, really appreciate everybody doing that. Thanks, Joe, for being the host of this show, man. Really love talking about sports, and anytime I get a chance to sit down and talk about sports with the professor, man, I'm down. So let's get into it, my man.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're save Manther's the big Kahuna trade, so we might as well talk about that a little bit more as we go in and not start with the best there. Usually, that's not how you do that. But a trade
How you
that
doing? How are you doing, man?
doing well, doing well. It's a good week. The baseball started. I've been mainly paying attention to other hockey teams as the stretch run
Yep,
dies down here, and just paying attention to who impresses me as young guys when it comes to the Flyers at this point. But
exactly.
it's still been pretty good. But I think as we dive right into some trades here when it comes to the NHL, one of the ones I did like the most, even though I still don't think they'll be able to protect him in the expansion draft. So I feel like the Ducks have a plan of action to make sure Hayden Fleury's not taken by Ron Francis. But getting Hayden Fleury to the Ducks made sense to me because they just traded a sixth in Hockenpah, who's developed into a solid guy like Pierce said, but a bigger defensive defenseman, doesn't have the up potential of a Hayden Fleury, who was a top drafty guy that everyone thought would be potentially a top 3
Yeah, but you know what
defenseman.
though? I really like Hockenpah's game though, and
Oh,
I
he's a
really
good veteran
yeah,
defenseman. The difference is he's a bottom 3 defenseman. Hayden Fleury's
yeah.
potential is top 3
Yeah. Oh,
defenseman.
yeah. Agreed. Yeah. Agreed. I mean, that's probably why they also got the 6th round draft pick with that as well, too. But I really do like Hockenpah's game, and he comes at a cheap price. You know what I mean? He's only like $750,000. I thought this was somebody that the Flyers would be looking at. You know what I mean? I just yeah. I just thought this would be somebody that they would be looking at because he would be coming in cheap. He would be somebody that they could bring
I
in
think
now
it's
and help
because
out now.
Hockenpah is kind of you already have Hagen Morin, and I think Hockenpah
Yeah.
is similar to the right-handed version of
Yep.
Morin, so you're adding in a lot of similarity, just physical shot blocking guys, which is not as much of today's age. But if you want to do it and it
Yeah.
works, great. But you would have to make sure it works because that's not really the style as much anymore to have all those guys in your lineup. If it works, you look great. If it doesn't, then you don't look.
Right. Yeah, obviously. Yeah, obviously. But I'll tell you what though, we thought that there was a few of us that felt that the day was going rather slow because there wasn't a lot of moves, but a lot of like the big name moves actually happened on like the Saturday and Sunday. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
and there were
Beforehand.
still some good ones the day of.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it was interesting that the value you ended up getting for Hall was not much different than Sam Bennett. But with the Bennett trade to the Panthers, they got technically 2 seconds, where Bjork was actually, when my friend Zach looked it up, a fifth. So they didn't even get 2 seconds for Hall because Bjork was actually a later round pick. And then they got the second with the Hall trade, where with the Flames, they got Emil Heineman, who's a guy that they were talking about could come over next year, even just because of his wits and smarts from overseas. And just one of those good players that plays the game the right way and is a great straight line skater. So it makes some good sense for the Flames, plus another second they got for 2022. So that trade makes the most sense for both teams because Sam Bennett he was good in the playoffs, but I think had to get out of Calgary, have no pressure of being the draft pick he was. And he's going to Florida, just like Pirlo and I simply put this trade yesterday. The best way to sum this trade up is he's going to Florida just to be him. He doesn't have to worry about being that draft pick that they expect more.
Right.
He's going to Florida just to do the game.
Relieve the pressure. You know what I mean?
Yeah, getting from him.
Relieve the pressure. You know, and the Flames actually did another deal too, where they dealt goalie David Rittich to the Toronto for
worked out as well in the first game as Toronto hoped. But
well. But we all thought that Calgary were going to be more sellers this past coming trade deadline, owing to the coaching change and all the changes that are going on in Calgary. And we expected a little bit more from Calgary, I think, than what we did get. I mean, we did get 2 moves, but I thought we were expecting maybe a little bit more coming out of Calgary.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like Calgary is also a team that has to do a lot in the offseason because most of the guys are going to move, unless if you're moving your bottom depth guys like your Rittich as a goaltender comparisons.
Yeah.
You're not going to move like Lindholm in season probably. You're not going to move. Well, you're definitely not going to move Gaudreau in season. So like they have a lot of trades that would be more probably off season than it would be. You're not going to move Hanifin unless you find the right team, most likely in season either. So if you move guys coming off of good years to try to get the best and you move guys that are aging, I feel like Calgary's team was kind of a team that was more set up to have to make moves more off season than in season. But that's just the way that I kind of perceived them.
That makes sense.
They're definitely one of hockey's more disappointing teams this year, though. The Calgary Flames. They should be better than they're another team. It's like the Flyers should be much better than they are with their roster, but they're not. So
right, exactly. And you know what else? I really thought that Toronto had won the day, but I really maybe think Florida might have won the day here. I think with the moves that Florida has made.
Yeah, I mean, Toronto's going to be interesting because it's kind of like Pirlo and I were talking about before we started his show yesterday in the chat. It seems like some of the deadline might have been a little bit less active just because people are looking at how much teams like Washington getting Mantha are going for obviously a repeat. You have Tampa looking like they're going for it again here. So it seems like everybody's kind of pushing to go for it of those 2 teams plus Colorado. So some teams that are kind of in the middle ground went, well, unless if we really get going at the right time, we're probably not going to beat them in a playoff series. So there's no point at just going all in and wasting asset picks to get people that are not going to get us fully. Toronto seems to think, obviously, they're the other team that has a chance for that deeper run because otherwise I don't think you give up a first for Nick Foligno, who's a more defensive forward at this point, but that's exactly what they need. But that's a move that shows you they think they can compete to get into the postseason. Now, that's more of a waiting game because a lot of people think the North Division, when you read stuff, is a lot more running gun than any other division. So how are they going to play anybody in the North, let alone just Toronto, once they get postseason and play outside of their division? So that's going to be what's interesting to see.
Because once they get up against teams like in the East and in the Central, You know what I mean? Depending on who the North is going to be playing for their next round of playoffs once they get out of their division. You know what I mean? They're going to be facing teams that are going to be a lot less run and gun, and they're going to need that more defensive minded type players. That's why I think Toronto did a really good job with bringing Foligno in there. And you know, what see here's what I think the paradigm issue was with this trade deadline. The teams that were expected to be big sellers are not or did not become big
It's also because
sellers.
they came back into the playoff race.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
Because those teams that we expected to be big sellers are in a playoff race right now. So they want to try to keep everybody as best as they can to try to make their run to get into the playoffs. So teams that were going to be sellers this particular trade deadline were not. And teams that were buyers this particular trade deadline particularly were not as well. It was kind of the exact opposite, where you would think teams like at the top, Toronto, Colorado, Florida wouldn't be making as many moves, but they were the ones that made some of the most moves. Boston and others that made some of those moves. The Islanders, bringing in those guys and stuff like that.
Because and Zajac, yeah.
That's what I mean. So they're making all these moves. These top teams are making the moves, and the bottom teams aren't. That's the other thing too, where the teams that don't have any money are the teams that are in it, and teams that don't have are teams that have a whole bunch of money are teams that are not in it.
Yeah, there's only teams if they made a trade it was going to be more for planning ahead. If the Kings acquired someone they could have for now that has a contract that's younger, but they could also have for the future. That's the only way you thought a deal for someone like a Goudreau or a Eichel, but he's injured, could have got done in season if it went through LA or somebody that has the cap space.
That would have been the only one. That would have been the only one. You know what I mean? I don't think those deals are going to happen during the trade deadline.
I guess wanted to give up some of his Detroit prospects, but I wouldn't foresee that. So I would say more going through LA. But I still feel like that's the main team to look at for a lot of these guys in the offseason too, just because of the money they have and the assets to trade for them. But that's something that's later down the line. But when it comes to the Canadiens, I thought the Canadiens are one of the more interesting teams on deadline day because they're trying to play, as we know, since they brought in Dominique Ducharme there, who I usually just call by his last name because I usually botch his first name, but
because I would think it would be easier to say Dominique than it would be.
They're trying to bring in a more defensive thing, which is what John Merrill is. It certainly is not what Eric Gustafsson is.
Right.
So I find it interesting what they were doing because it seemed like when they got him in, it was to change their system and be the Canadian team that kind of more ran a defensive with an offensive system and wasn't as much like Toronto's defense has been better by the numbers this year. But if you look at their team, there's still a lot of running, gunning, even with that better performed defense. They're not the most defensively sound. Where it looked like the Canadiens, the way they said, okay, we don't have the most skill of our division, obviously. So the way we had to compete is to try to be the most defensively sound. The rumors they had in the deadline and the fact that they brought in Gus plus John Merrill and were also interested in Tony makes me think I don't know exactly what they're doing with their defense.
Yeah.
Because you have Gus, who's more offensive. You have Tony DeAngelo, who's also more offensive and issues. And then you have Merle, who's more defensive. So it seems like they're trying to figure out how they want to mix their offense and defense on their defense, and that's something they're kind of stuck with right
exactly.
now. They were a little bit interesting of a team to follow just because of the rumors where the Merle acquisition makes sense because he's a defensive defenseman. I'm happy they took Gus from the Flyers because we don't need Eric Gustafsson, but it just didn't make much sense to have interest in him and then pick him up after you already have enough defense depth and got John Merle before that. So it was just kind of weird, their deadline.
Yeah, what they were able to pick up, you know what I mean? So I'm looking up and down the list here of things, and I tell you what, I think Boston and the Islanders also would have to say get an A+ for the trade deadline weekend. if you want to go back that far, because of what they were able to achieve and what they were able to attain over the weekend before the trade deadline was happening. I mean, I think those were probably the biggest names that went out there, aside from Taylor Hall, that went to Boston. You know what I mean? And then obviously the Mantha that we'll talk about later, right? But I really, really like what Boston did with getting Lazard, getting Riley, and then getting Hall for practically nothing. You know what I mean? Even if he is a rental player, I understand that. But if he does end up signing there, then that could be a boon for Boston.
Yeah, and the big thing for Taylor Hall is he's one of those guys, they brought him up on the deadline day, that once he gets into the postseason, no matter how he's doing with that regular season, he's one of those guys that his numbers, the other guys they used were Coyle, Marcus Johansson, Jaden Schwartz, and Pavelski to highlight that example, that his numbers go up points per game wise always in the postseason. And that's what the Bruins know, they'll be able to score enough. Unless a miracle happens, the Rangers and the Flyers sure as heck ain't catch them. The Rangers probably aren't. They know that they just have to get there, and they're getting a guy that they think will help them to maybe propel farther than people anticipated into the playoffs if he gets his game fully going. And that's also a similar reason why Florida brought in Sam Bennett, because they know even though they're doing really well this year, they're still kind of a year ahead of themselves.
Yeah.
And eventually they might catch Tampa, or if they do get through the East, they'll have to probably beat Colorado or Vegas. So they know they have to bring in guys that are going to perform at the top of their game, playoff style wise, and then regular season is just what they do in the regular season at that point.
Exactly. But, I mean, all day long, though, for what the Boston was able to do on trade deadline day or a couple days before, I thought that was really good moves for them. I also really
they also brought in Mike Riley, who was
that's what
Senators, kind of like a journeyman 6'7" defenseman, but now produced as a guy that seemed like he could steadily stay in your lineup as the bottom pair defenseman. So if he can do that, that would help the Bruins, since they've obviously had issues with their defense depth whenever he's able to get match in the lineup since he's coming down from Canada. But that seemed like a pretty good aid there to go with Taylor Hall. So it seems like they made good moves to plan for the playoffs, but also not screw themselves over for the future either. So
exactly. And so that's why I thought they did really well with for what they were able to pick up and what they were able to do. They were able to address that defensive need, and they were able to bring in some scoring depth. You know what I mean? So that's definitely what the Boston needed. So they were able to do well. I also like what the Islanders did too. The fact that they were able to bring in Palmieri and Zajac, for that matter, you know what I mean? Getting the, because of Anders Lee being out, you know what I mean? That I think it didn't necessarily affect them per se as far as their points production, but it definitely affected the room because that's their captain. You know what I mean? And being able to bring in guys that can come in and they can plug in right away, that are going to be instant help for your team. That's
and instant leaders for your team also.
Exactly. So that's why I really like what the Islanders did.
Yeah, I like the Islanders. The nice thing too about that, Tom Fitzgerald, Ryan Fitzgerald's father, Phantom's player, decided to be very nice about it too, and even said, like Pirlo said on his show, I hope we have the last pick in the draft as a division
classy
rival.
I mean, that's just so classy
Of the Islanders. He said, I hope we have the last pick in the draft, because he wants to see his guys in Palmieri and Zajac win. And that trade also made perfect sense, because Lou Amorello used to be with the Devils.
Yep.
And then came to the Islanders, so he already knows Palmieri and Zajac.
Exactly. And with Anders Lee being the captain going down and them needing that kind of leadership in the room there, that was a really good idea with bringing that particular guy into the room there. And that's somebody that Lou Lamoriello had known about, has history with, you know what I mean? And that's why I think we saw the move with Jeff Carter to Pittsburgh. Because of
Brian Burke and Ron Hextall both like Jeff Carter and talked to tremendously about him. Then Hextall has the direct connection, of course, with Jeff Carter and being in LA when he went to LA. So
Exactly, and that's why I thought that we got to see that Jeff Carter, because originally had a no movement clause or no trade clause, and he was, I guess, convinced at the 12th hour to go to Pittsburgh, and it's like, well, gee, you get to play with Sidney Crosby.
All right. It seemed like family, because when I saw his wife tweet something out of thanks for the support with California, it seemed like since he has people in PA still, that he wanted to eventually just come back to Pennsylvania, and he still has his place in Sea Isle. Like you'll see him down the shore sometime if you go.
Oh, okay.
But
I didn't know he still was coming back to the area.
Yeah, he's still in the area at times, so I feel like it might have been a family thing. Like, let me just go back to PA before I actually retire, and then I'll probably retire shortly. So I feel like it might have been one of those things. But I think that was a good move for Jeff Carter career wise, because like the Kings said when they traded him, he doesn't owe us anything anymore, really. We're trying to thank him by giving him a chance to win somewhere else as he rides on into the sunset. So that's also a nice way for an organization to look at it for a player that helped them win a cup when they came in there. So
yeah, thank you very much. I mean, so all right. I guess we got to talk about it now, huh?
Well, first, before we go into the big trades, I did want to highlight a couple small ones that I think are going to work out well. Pirlo highlighted one, but it also worked out already in the game Monday evening that Volkov in the game Stolarz went off, scored two of the Ducks goals in the shutout that Stolarz broke the Ducks record with 46 saves. He came over for just a seventh, and Moran. I'm kind of with Pirlo on that. He looked like a guy buried in Tampa that might get going with the Ducks. The Ducks take a lot of chances on guys that they hope get going in their organization, but it's smart because if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. It didn't work with Milano. Like Pirlo said, Dayton Heinen, the jury's kind of still out on, but we'll see. Volkov and Fleury, though, those seem like two pretty good trial by fire. Let's see what they can do. Pickups for them there. And then another good small pickup with the Canadians that actually made sense a while ago was Eric Stahl. That people coming at that move didn't make any sense, because just because you played for Buffalo doesn't mean you forget how to compete in a playoff run. It just means basically the meme that they had with Anthony Mantha, which was when they were up 4-1, it was the coach for the Capitals talking to them, and they were like, so this is a multi-goal lead. So you do blah, 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 because he was on the Red Wings beforehand and probably very rarely ever had a multi-goal lead. So
right.
that's you don't just forget how to compete. So I think Stahl was a good pickup. Brandon Lemieux looked good since going to LA. Looked like he was going to be an odd man out, probably an expansion draft pickup from the Rangers anyway. So that seemed like a smart move there. And then when it came to the Blackhawks, there were another team that I think did really good on the deadline day. Before that, they brought back Vinny Hinostroza coming up to or not even on deadline day, coming up to deadline day. They brought in Brett Conley. They traded Lucas Carlson. It wasn't working as well for them. The guy that I listened to from the Chicago Tribune that explained that Stillman's probably the better of the two. So they swapped young defensemen. They got Wallmark out to Florida, who's more of a guy you put in your lineup, in and out of your lineup. That's a young guy that can compete at that has a high compete level. That's probably more for a playoff run team than a Chicago team. And the big thing that this guy was saying when it came to the Blackhawks that covers them is Bjorkstrom's the big kahuna they like, and here come bringing him over from overseas, who Florida kind of fell out of favor more with him than I think the other way. But he's able to move on, and then he's able to go somewhere where it seems like they said, they want him to come over next year, start implementing himself into the system, and you'll see what he's able to do. But he still has good potential. Plus, you brought in a veteran in Brett Conley, who, if you can get him going again, you definitely have the guys that can set him up in Kirby Doc whenever Taves comes back. If he does, hopefully you have Jonathan Taves, and then you have Pia Suter, who's proven himself as a good guy from overseas as an undraftee. So I think that team was another team that was pretty smart. on top of the Avalanche, just because you brought in Dubnyk as a goalie, you brought back Carl Soderberg, who has
Yep.
familiarity,
Yep.
and you brought back Patrick Nemeth, who has familiarity. And the only thing people said they would envision Colorado doing is maybe getting center depth, maybe getting defense depth, and a goaltender. And they did all three of those things.
Exactly.
So it seems like they definitely know what they're doing. And then Montour to Florida, I think, is going to be wonderful for Brandon Montour, because I just wanted to see him
getting him out of Buffalo.
Yeah, I just wanted to see him get the hell out of Buffalo.
Yeah.
He's a guy that seems like he has more in the skates and
get your bags out of Buffalo.
Yeah,
get your bags out of Buffalo.
Savard to Tampa, obviously, that trade seemed
that was great. Yeah, good.
That trade seemed to Tampa didn't even seem like they thought that trade would happen, and then they're like, "Oh, really? Oh, okay, cool. Yeah,
yeah, right." You know, that's the other thing too. That was the other thing too. That was part of that whole group of teams that we didn't expect to be sellers, like Columbus. Like, who would have thought that they would have been the sellers that they were this year? Because obviously the wheels fell off for them. You know what I mean? And they're not even going to be, considered for being in the playoffs. So we weren't necessarily expecting the Columbus to be sellers, right?
No. I think the Breeze Bars just kind of had that fall in. They're only paying 25% for Savard too, which is nice to have that go through. And speaking of having money funnel through your team, Doug Wilson with the Sharks did a good job of doing that to bring in some extra draft capital, just kind of being everybody's banker at this trade deadline to help take in some salaries. So he did a good job bringing in some draft capital to do that. And another underrated move is the Blackhawks getting Adam Gaudette, who won the Hobey Baker while he was still in college. Not recently, obviously, that was Cole Caulfield. But his last year in college, he won the Hobey Baker. And then he's a guy I think will be able to break out potentially there and do some good things as well. They need more forward and or center depth, depending where they decide to put him. He looked a little bit better on wing in the NHL, but we'll have to see as time goes on. And then Jan Mark, they were then able, because of Gaudette, to get a second and third for him, which I don't think they envisioned trading him until they honestly got Adam Gaudette fall into their lap. So that ended up working out for Chicago also. So I think they did a good job at the deadline too. But yeah, I guess you're right. At this point, we could get into the one loan, the big hockey, the quote unquote hockey trade, which is like the team's actually preparing for making a trade for someone that has years that they're trying to get as a big future core player of their organization, which is what the Capitals think as a good mix-in player, basically the hockey equivalent to Jason Worth, is going to mix in well and help you a lot, just like a guy they signed years ago for their baseball team. But he's a guy that did. He scored right away in his first game. You got rid of Phanatic, who really was starting to just kind of be not needed there anymore. He was not always in the lineup.
Right,
he wasn't
right. I mean, the only one I think that really is the Verona one. But
I don't know how much that hurts DC either, because it didn't look like Lavi was that big of a fan of Jacob Vrana, because he was getting healthy scratched and even though he was doing all right, it seemed like from the onset, if you would look at him and number wise, he was doing all right. It looked like he wasn't Lavi's most favorite guy, where we know Lavi likes those big boys that can crash the net, have a good shot. And that's exactly what Mantha is. So I feel like he fits into more what Peter Laviolette wants, and that's also why Capitals went with this, where Vrana fits in more with what Detroit needs, because you need somebody to keep up with Dylan Larkin as he rushes a zone, so you can actually have that line do its best. Vrana is someone that can keep up with Dylan Larkin, so that could probably help both teams. Phanatic will probably just play on their third line or something, and then they also got a first and a second, so they're getting more and more draft capital, and that's Yzerman drafting, so he's usually been pretty good no matter where that first round pick is, even if it's basically a second with the last pick of the first.
Yeah, that they get back from the Capitals. The Capitals also picked up Michael Raffl too from the Flyers for a fifth round draft pick, and I think that's also going to help them with some of their forward depth as well too. With what the Capitals need. I mean, he didn't play last night, in the game, but he could be that forward depth for them where he can pretty much play up and down the lineup. I mean, we know what Raffl's skill set is and what he brings to the table. So
Yeah, he's a guy that can definitely play up and down. I do think Mantha going to because he isn't. He's a guy that will be able to facilitate to you and also score, but he's also a guy that you need to have people on his lines. Like you found out, which is fine. Not everybody, like Mike Hoffman's obviously not a line runner. But not everybody in the league's a line runner. Some guys need to be guys that do just really well on their line with the guys around them. But
right.
Mantha's a guy that will do really well when put in the right situations. I mean, he had already 24 goals in 17-18, 25 and 18-19. And this guy, if he really gets going, still has that potential. He's only 26 to have the 35 to 40 if you set him up and get him in the right spots. And that's what Washington has. You have the Nicholas Backstroms of the world, who's one of the best passers of maybe all time and definitely our current age.
I've got to be up there.
You have him, and then you have Ovechkin, who takes any attention away from you if you're ever on the ice with him while on the power play. So
Right.
that just benefits you, even though he doesn't pass to you often, but that just benefits you from that. And then you have Kuzi, that's a good assist guy as well. So they got a lot of guys that are going to be able to really set up Mantha. And then Mantha, like he did yesterday, if you give him enough room, he has long strides. He's able to create his own shot a bit. He's just a guy that's more you would rather see get in front of the net, clog up the goalie with his big 6'5"
I
over
was just gonna
230
say because he's a big frame.
frame.
Yep.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and he's good at deflecting the puck. That's what you would normally like to see. I think in Washington, you see his numbers in possession and the Corsi and the Fenwick go right back over the 50 percentiles you want, and he'll be doing what he's supposed to do there. I think that's one of those trades. It's a high risk for Washington, obviously. Detroit's bringing in the Vrana and a first and a second. So even if Vrana didn't work out as well, if you draft somebody that does, that balances
Yeah.
it. So I think it's a bigger risk for DC, but it's also DC showing their fans we're going for a repeat and we're getting a guy that we think fits in perfectly to our lineup that everyone knows has more skill than he showed in Detroit most
Right.
recently. Just due to probably outside stuff of not being as knowing he doesn't fit in as much with the team anymore, being in trade rumors in decent years,
Yeah.
that eventually catches up to you usually.
And that usually that pressure kind of gets to you, you know what I mean, and stuff like that, that it does make it kind of tough. So I don't know. I thought the trade deadline went really well as far as that's concerned. I mean, this being a really odd year and a whole bunch of different things going on with only about 16 or 17 games left now for the rest of the season for most of the teams. You know what I mean? It's and the top teams now are starting to separate themselves, and you're starting to see those top 3, 4 teams from each division is now starting to kind of pull away from the lower teams that aren't making it. You know what I mean? So I think as the games go on, you're going to start to see more and more of that, more and more of the separation, more and more of the pulling away. You know what I mean? Where you're going to start seeing some of those top 3, 4 teams are going to, and even some of those teams are battling it out too.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like I don't think the Central is set. I think that's going to go down to the wire. Quite honestly.
No, yeah, you got Tampa, Florida, and Carolina all tied right now. Nashville's not going to catch them, so whoever's in fourth will be in fourth. But unless if a miracle happens there, but you have the other three teams that are right there, even with each other. That I agree with you. That one, by strength of roster, I feel like I would just slightly favor Tampa since they're all tied right now, but from way of play for going into a playoff run, you would probably want to play the game of the Hurricane. So it's kind of a little it's a little
Well,
hard to
yeah,
judge.
but you get Kucherov back though from Tampa Bay at the end of the season. You know what I mean?
Oh,
And
that will help for the playoff run. I'm just talking about winning the Central.
yeah. Okay, I
Yeah,
got you. I got you.
yeah.
All right.
Where I like the Carolina plays that perfect going into the playoffs, good on both ways style. Tampa does that well, but still at times has their defense be the
Right.
reason they lose a game. And then Florida's been good on both ends. Nashville's the team that is good for them to come back into the standings, but they're not in that elk of
Yeah.
teams. But I would say out of those teams, if we're going for the cup, the best Stanley Cup contender would be Tampa. So I'll just go based off of that for who I think's the best team coming out in the Central, whether they win the division or not. I would say, especially with Kucherov coming back, the best cup contender of that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We all like Florida. We all like Colorado or Carolina. But look, you got to face the facts, and the facts are, I think that Tampa Bay is pretty much going to be the team to beat out there in this Central. So I mean, that's kind of just where that's at. But when you look at teams like in the West, where that's a little bit closer, and even though the top four teams are starting to pull away, but all those top four teams are still kind of fighting it out with Colorado, with Vegas. You know what I mean? And then Minnesota, I think, is going to be the fourth,
probably the third. Minnesota will be
or third, right?
They're more of a top three fight too, but Minnesota would have to catch up because they're at 51-58 for Vegas, 62 points for Colorado. St. Louis is at 44 to Arizona's 43, and then San Jose is not too far behind at 40.
Right. So those top two are selected, but the ones underneath are still kind of fighting it out.
Yeah, I mean the Wild would really have to struggle to all of a sudden not be in third place. I would think at 51 points, especially with St. Louis never being able to get fully consistent. Where the Wild have actually had runs this year. The Blues have always gone on runs and then going on back
other ends.
5 play.
Yeah.
So I feel like that division, though, I think when it comes to your favorite, it's still probably Colorado because most people, I mean, they're a plus 52. I had Vegas coming in the Stanley Cup. I think now I would flip that to favoring Colorado and have Vegas be my second team of the West because Vegas still looks really good. And they're at a plus 38. Normally, when you look at a plus 38 goal differential, you're like, holy crap, that's amazing. And then you look at Colorado's and go, oh, they're a plus 52.
So our plus 36 doesn't look like much, does it?
So I would say Colorado, far and beyond, as we wrap up our NHL talk on this edition of the Sports Phanatic Sportscast, is the favorite for the Cup right now.
Yeah.
With Vegas, another West team, being second. And then I would have to put the two East teams, honestly, as Washington and Tampa before I put Toronto. Sorry, Toronto fans, but that's just until I see the playoff run from.
Who was? Oh no, you said one East team, Washington. Who was the other East team?
Huh?
You said one East team, Washington, against Tampa, but who would be the other East team?
No, I'm saying Washington and Tampa are favorites over. Well, normally Toronto would be an Eastern Conference.
Yeah, right. And so that's why I was a little confused there because I think the Islanders are more so coming out of the East than anything. I mean, when I look at how they've been playing, I know they're back and forth with Washington. And there's going to be a couple games here that's going to come up between the Islanders and Washington. And I'm going to be looking forward to those. But because obviously Washington's on top right now with 60 points and the Islanders at 58. But I like with what both teams did at the trade deadline. And I think it's going to be a race between those two teams, Washington and the Islanders. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Isles, Washington, like Tampa's already obviously won it. You have a lot of guys from that. Washington's won. You have a lot of guys from that. Islanders, I think they have the team to do it. You just need to see. I don't think they have the equivalency of. Well, to Washington they might because they have a young guy with a veteran. Washington has two young guys, but when it comes to some of the other teams, with how like Gruby stepped up for Colorado to put them in the comparison for Stanley Cup contenders, how somebody like even I don't know Drigger has done in Florida. I feel like the Islanders, Sorokin's doing really well, but how's a rookie going to? You have to wait to see how a rookie and then Varlamov does in the playoffs. He did pretty good last year. Will he do well again?
Yeah.
That's my only thing. With the Isles, they play the great playoff style game, so I feel like they are a contender. They would be in my top 4.
Yeah.
For sure. But it's a toss up. I would say
it is. It's tough.
I would say the top 2 contenders in the league are definitely Vegas and Colorado. Those would be my if I'm going league wide, I would go Colorado, Vegas.
See, I would
Colorado,
not.
Vegas, Washington, Tampa, and then the Islanders, and then.
See, I would go with Colorado, then I would go with Toronto, then I would go with Washington, right? And then I would put Carolina and then Vegas. Because
well, you said first, so who was your first place team?
Oh, Colorado.
Colorado, okay, got
Colorado, and then I would go with Toronto next. Then I would put Washington third, right, and Carolina fourth, and Vegas fifth. The reason why is because, for one, Vegas is at 41 games, Islanders are at 42, Washington's at 43, Toronto's at 43. So Vegas has 2 games in hand on some of the lower ends, but they only have 58 points, where some of the other teams have 60. But there's also five teams that have 58 points.
Yeah.
Okay. And 3 of those teams are Carolina, Tampa Bay, and Florida. So, you know, it's like it's a 5-way tie for 5th place.
Yeah. For me, I just think Vegas and Colorado supplant themselves just because of how much they outscore their opponents. The only other team that's close to that, if you ranked in that order, you would put Tampa and Carolina before you put anybody else after Colorado and Vegas. But I don't always rank it off of that. I'm just saying, I think when it comes to having as stacked of a team as those two have, plus outscoring their opponent, that's what for me has to put those two as.
I mean, I'm with you. I see where you're coming from. I see, yeah.
Like, I honestly think that's the teams that whoever potentially ends up beating each other will be who is in the Stanley Cup for the West. So it'll be interesting to see. But that's just, I think, how we put it there for our Stanley Cup contenders. And we also wrapped up the NHL Trade Dead Line for you. I hope you all enjoy the hockey coverage.
Yeah,
from
man.
our. Did we have the ad we had to run now? Are we going to go right into basketball?
Yeah, we're gonna take a quick word from our sponsors. We'd like to thank CCCResorts.com for sponsoring the SteelFlyers All Sports Network. We'd like to thank them for all the things that they've been able to do as far as helping us and supporting us. And we really appreciate all that. And here's a word from our sponsor, and we'll be right back after this.
Greetings. This is SteelFlyers from the SteelFlyers All Sports Network, and we have 2 very special guests. We are delighted to be joined by Tracy Musser and Nicole Howard from the Canine Country Club Resorts. Tracy and Nicole are both managers for CCC Resorts and work at the Windsor or at the club, one of 2 locations, both in Manheim, Pennsylvania. Congratulations on your 30th year anniversary of being in business. Let me start off by saying this. SteelFlyers stands behind this company 100%. They've taken care of SteelFlyers Furry Friend for the last 2 years now, and they are a one-stop shop for everything your furry friend needs. In fact, let's find out what our friends at CCC Resorts offer. Nicole, how are you today?
Good. How are you?
Doing great, thank you. What are some of the great boarding services that you guys offer, and what do we have to do in order to get our furry friends taken care of when we are unable to travel with them?
Well, we like to bring everybody in for a tour first. That way they can see the behind the scenes, they can see where they stay, they can see where they play, and then we explain all of the fun things that we can add on to their reservation, whether it be one of our packages, either a nature walk, a ball time, or even a cuddle time.
Oh, wow, that sounds great. Boy, it sure sounds like a resort to me. So how are you today, Tracy?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Tracy, tell me, is it true that you guys have both an indoor and an outdoor pool at the Windsor location?
It is true. We've got one of each, so we're able to offer year-round swimming. The indoor pool is a great option for dogs who are swimming for therapy or rehab. It's got that sloped entry so they can wade into the water. Our outdoor pool is a little bit larger, and it's 4 foot deep the whole way across. Both of them are saltwater pools, so it's really easy on the dog's skin and coat.
Wow, that's very awesome. So then during the summer months, you have a much deeper pool outside and then a sloped entry shallow pool indoors for the dogs. Tracy, tell the folks how we can get some pool time.
Well, the first thing everyone does is come for an intro swim. We use that time to make sure the dog is comfortable in the water. We make sure they know how to get out of the pool safely, and we go over all the pool rules and etiquette with the clients as well. After that, they're able to schedule private appointments where they have the pool to themselves, or they can invite friends and have a whole group swim going on.
So after a dip in the pool, then it would have to be off to the groomers, right? I mean, our furry friends cannot go out looking their best. Nicole, what are some of the great services your top-notch groomers provide?
Our groomers, they specialize in full service grooms. We can do the basics, whether it be just a bath and a brush out or a blowout. Or for the extra pampered pooches, we can do nail dremels, we can do deodorizing soaks, and also facials.
Wow, man, that sounds like a resort if you ask me. Tracy, I know one of the main programs here at CCC Resorts is the WAGS program. The SteelFlyers dog is enrolled in this program. So why don't you tell the folks what is involved in this and how they can get enrolled?
Yeah, the WAGS program is our primary daycare option at the Windsor. It's designed to be a structured program for people who are looking for a set routine for their dog. They all come on the same days each week, which allows them to have set friends, and we know exactly what's going on with each group. So we do a little bit more activities, and we build more into their daily routine there. But we've got other daycare options as well for people looking for a little less commitment. We do an hourly care where you can drop them off and just pay by the hour. We also do a day stay option, which is great for the dogs that prefer human friends instead of making friends with other dogs. And then we have a traditional daycare option as well if you're looking for the occasional outing for your dog.
Wow, there you have it. A full-service groomer, a daycare program, and an indoor and outdoor pool. What more could you ask for? Sure seems like CCC Resorts has everything covered. Remember, DOG, depend on God.
Hey, welcome back in, everybody, to the Sports Phanatic News Sportscast, as we just gave you the NHL deadline wrap-up with some Stanley Cup contender projections of our top contenders. We're now going to get into some NBA basketball action for you, as May 16th is also, as of now, the docket to end the season.
Playoffs are starting to heat up, baby.
Yep, as they're coming into the crunch run. And we also have a preview this evening of who could be your Eastern Conference Finals matchup of the Brooklyn Nets and Philadelphia 76ers in Philadelphia. Now, it is to note this won't be exactly the matchup of what we want to see in the postseason, because James Harden's out with a hamstring.
Okay.
Kyrie Irving is taking some more personal leave. So everybody is not going to be in. Oh, and I think LaMarcus
Simmons
Aldridge
is out.
still. LaMarcus Aldridge is a game-time decision with an illness.
Okay.
So there's not going to be as deep of a lineup, but these teams are also built, as we know, with the Nets and Sixers to withstand having guys out of the lineup. So even with guys out of the lineup, it will be interesting to see what they're able to do in this game and be able to get done. It does seem like for the Sixers, however, most guys are looking at this injury report here. Nobody's on it other than George Hill, who's still out with his thumb that they acquired today. So it seems like they will have their lineup go, but it's still going to be a game that's still interesting and fun to watch, because you still got KD going up against Joel Embiid in this game, which, even though you don't have the other two in, that in itself is still interesting basketball to watch. You got a former Sixer in Shaman as a good shooter, and Joe Harris, the Sixers sometime. The one way you can still sometimes beat them is by getting up enough threes and then cashing them in when you're really consistent on your threes. So it'll be interesting to see how they're able to man those guys. And you still got Blake Griffin, who ever since going to the Nets seems to be his old, not his old athletic self, but less of a shell of his old athletic self. and starting to come out of his bubble a bit and seem to be spewing some confidence. So they're 7-3 in their last 10. If I'm not mistaken, the Sixers are one less than that. Yeah, they're 6-4 in their last 10. So both of these teams are looking pretty solid. I think this will be a good game. It's just I wouldn't necessarily rank it as a preview to the Eastern Conference Finals just because you don't have everybody in, but it's still a good game just to see where everyone's at, and even with guys out, where the Nets. It's really a better game to see for Nets fans with people out. How close do they get to the Sixers, or do they even beat the Sixers with people out? Because then that would show you that they're definitely most likely the favorites for going into the postseason because they beat them with people out. This game is kind of the game to, I think, show odds makers who do we like to clarify for them. And that's just not if it's the Sixers, but if it's the Nets, they're the favorite.
Yeah.
Because if the Nets win this game shorthanded, they're going to go, well, the Sixers had everybody in. The Nets had two of their main guys out in Harden and Kyrie, and also Aldridge, and they still beat them. So we have to favor them now if this becomes a series. Where for the Sixers, if they win, I don't think it'll change much because they say they beat them, they took advantage, they did what they were supposed to do and had to do.
Right.
But I think this is definitely a game that could change most people's views of just how good the Nets are.
Well, Durant is scheduled to play.
Exactly.
For this game, and the Sixers are 4-1 on the series so far this year. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and it's not like they were close games.
Games were prior to half of these people coming into the team with Brooklyn. So
I mean, the last time they played was February 20th.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's been a while, and it's a little bit's changed, but the fact that they were 4-1 and the fact that these games, some of them weren't even close, like 124 to 108, 112 to 104. Now the one game that the Nets did win, it was the Nets 122 and the Sixers 109. You know what I mean? So I do agree with what you're saying. This is going to definitely let people know what's going to be going on with the Nets, but without their two big stars, Irving or Kyrie and Harding out, even though Durant's going to play, the Sixers are not all the way there either. So it's not the full matchup. And I think even when it is going to be a full matchup,
the Sixers are pretty much all the way there. Unless if one of our two stars decides to rest this game, then the Sixers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't sure if Simmons was going to play or not. But either way, I still think that the Sixers are going to be able to take care of business. And even if this does become a series, which it probably won't, right? Because one does not play two in the seedings, right?
It could become a series in the finals if you get the 1 and the 2 to the Eastern. If both of them
only in the finals. Okay, so they do the same thing.
Finals, I think.
Right. Okay, so they do the same thing in basketball that they do, where the top seed plays the lowest seed.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure it could become a series in the Eastern. If I'm not, I feel like that's just what I've heard while watching.
It would be a longer road for Brooklyn to try to get back to that than it would be. You know what I mean?
That's if the standings actually shake out how they are right now. But these teams are pretty much. That's the other thing. These teams are even right now too.
Yeah.
These teams are going to shake out really where they're going, for the rest of the season. But it's also, I think both of them at this point are trying to make sure they keep their guys healthy, stay above the Bucks, obviously, but keep their guys healthy and make sure nobody gets injured going in the playoff run while balancing, still trying to win these last handful of regular season games. I think that's the primary thing for both of those teams.
Okay, so they're only looking at so they're not playing. They're playing what, 81 games or?
No, they're playing less in the NBA this season. I can't remember what the exact number became, but it wasn't the normal, because 81 would basically be, they might as well have just played 82 if they played.
That's what I mean. So
it's definitely a little bit less than. I don't remember the exact.
Okay, because I'm looking at it right now, and so
72. They played 10 less games.
Okay, so 72. Okay. So the Sixers have a couple of games left.
Yeah, but all teams don't have, because you're going to May 16th. The NBA also isn't as run and gun as hot, like isn't as condensed as we've seen the hockey schedule.
They're not playing games
like
every other night.
5 of 7 nights you don't see as much in basketball.
Okay.
Yet. So I think they're doing a pretty good job for sure, because they're going all over, and somehow it's similar to baseball. It's not affecting them as much. So maybe the bubble thing doesn't work out as well as all of us first thought. In effect,
right. So the Sixers have effectively 16 games left.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that would be right math-wise.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's about where they're at. Okay. 16 games left. So they're tied with Brooklyn. Milwaukee's 3.5 back. The Hawks are 7.5, and Celtics are 8.5, and Miami 9.
Mm-hmm.
How many of the remaining games do the Sixers need to win in order to A, stay above the Nets, and or B, stay above the Bucks?
I think staying above the Bucks is obviously easier because you already have a 3.5 lead.
Right.
So as long as you don't go on like a 4-game losing streak, you should be able to stay ahead of the Bucks.
Okay.
Like, even if you play 500, which you don't want to do, but if you play 500 basketball around of the season, you would stay ahead the Bucks because you're 3.5.
Go 8-8 down the stretch.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't see them doing that anyway. So I think both of these teams will be fine staying above the Bucks. I think it's just going to be a battle at the end of who gets first, who gets second. Yeah. But when it comes to that, I think either of these teams, if they end up playing Charlotte and or the Knicks, should be able to beat either of those teams, no matter if you're in first or second, or if you end up playing the Pacers or Bulls, since they're doing that compete thing with the 7 through 10 teams, you should be able to beat those teams also. So I feel like no matter if you're first or second, that shouldn't screw you really. You just want to stay in first or second. You don't want to move down.
Obviously no.
That's all it is. But I think both of those teams are clearly the favorites of the West, and then Milwaukee's like, these teams are here, Milwaukee's like here.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah. So I think that's just the way it is. I don't think Atlanta is a team that's ready to make a deep run. They're the team in fourth. They're still a year away from having the bigger effect of making those deeper runs with the team they have. But it is hats off for them for bringing in Bogdanovich, and having him fit in, having Kevin Huerter, bringing in Lou Williams, showing your fan base that you definitely want to show that we're here now and we're here to stay, rather than just we're here for the future.
I mean, Boston over the last couple of years have perennially been in the playoffs.
No, I was talking about the Hawks.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Atlanta's a team well, Boston I don't think is going to compete in terms of going anywhere in the postseason.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, they're a team that I think is more accredited to how good Brad Stevens knows how to coach a team this season than it is them having the most perennial talent on their
but
team.
Atlanta not so much though. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Atlanta's a team that's still really young. That's why I think bringing in Lou helps. You brought in Bogdanovich. You have Young. You have Collins still really young. You brought in Capella. Cam Reddish is really young. So is obviously Hunter Huerter. I think they're just a year or two away from being that team that's going to make that deep playoff run. They're the team that now impresses you when you go, oh, look at those Atlanta Hawks. And then in a year or two, you're going to start talking about.
Look at those Atlanta Hawks now. Boy, they're playing a lot better. Yeah.
But when it comes to impress teams, because I think in the East we have clear-cut 2 favorites most people see when it comes to your championship are the Sixers and Nets. In the West, that is not the case whatsoever. Because you have now, let's be honest, the Lakers have always seemed like a team that are let's get to the playoffs and then we're going to just go absolutely ballistic and look like the Lakers again. So if Anthony Davis comes back in, LeBron comes back in, and everything starts moving fine and dandy, and everybody's all happy in LA, then you would still obviously have a chance there with the Lakers if those guys come back at the right time. And the key pivotal point is Anthony Davis has to be at least, I would say, 80%.
At least. So he still hasn't come back yet?
No, either has LeBron. So that's why the Lakers have
7 games back.
Falling off a little bit, which is why I don't think it's necessarily a good judgment of really where their team's at, because they're missing the two biggest guys on their team. That their team is the most built around, almost like Draisaitl, McDavid, run through these two dudes.
Yeah.
Like,
and when they're not there,
so yeah, that's not going to help you right now. The team that emerged the most, the Suns are a great team this year to watch and everything. They're 9-1 in their last 10. The only thing that I don't want to say they're a stone cold championship contender yet is because other than they brought in Chris Paul, that's why I throw them in the 60-40, 60 for being a contender, 40 for knockout.
Yeah.
You added Paul, which is the great veteran to hone in your youngsters, but minus Chris Paul, they're a very young, developing, similar to the Hawks, just ahead of the Hawks because they have that veteran playmaker in Paul that they brought in.
Right.
They have Booker, they have Mikal Bridges, who's really young. They brought in Saric, who's a good bench player. DeAndre Ayton's young. So I'll go 60-40, 60% they can contend for it, 40 they can. And that also is going to heavily depend on what the heck is going on with the Lakers' health. And also if the Clippers decide.
See, I was just going to ask you about the Clippers. What's
to be more like the Clippers in the postseason end of late. They're on a 6-game winning streak. Now they went 8-2. They're starting to come back in the standings.
Yep.
If they can do it, Rondo, you get for the playoffs. That's the reason at this point of his career you have Rondo on your team so he can just facilitate and step up his game in the playoffs. So that made good sense to me. Leonard's been out a bit. Ibaka's been out a bit, so that's affected them. Again, it's health. If those guys are completely healthy, especially Kawhi Leonard, then there'll be a team that I think is more 70-30 to compete for the finals. They would have a 70% chance of competing for it and a 30% chance of not doing as much. Okay. Where I still think if the Lakers are healthy, they're right around the Clippers with the percentile. It's just I would put them more at the 65% now just because I have so many questions of I feel like Anthony Davis won't even be 80. Like I feel like
when he comes back.
Yeah, of how came back and was such hobbly that you would almost want to be like how Kellerman was, who I don't normally always agree with, and just say, don't freaking play. Like be the guy to go on TV and say, no, don't be stupid. Don't go on the court. I don't care if you want to win the finals. You're good to get injured. And then that turned out to be one of the things that Max Kellerman was most right about in his entire life. Kevin Durant getting injured in the postseason. So
one thing.
So
Kellerman right about one thing.
Yeah, so I mean that's just the way it is. I think you have to be smart here. I don't want to see the Lakers bring back Anthony Davis if he's not fully ready. That's why I put them as 65. I would say now, just because of the experience, you have Leonard who won. My favorite at the 70-30 would probably be the Clippers for the West just because of experience. But then my next team, just because of how good they're performing and kind of have another guy that's a really good playmaker that it might be a much giving him this praise, but I've heard it on NBA TV from some like Grant Hill and others. Michael Conley kind of reminds you of a mini CP3 as a veteran that can facilitate and play make for you for the Utah Jazz out there. And he's really helped them settle down their young team and really hone in their young team with a Bogdanovich. You have Donovan Mitchell, who's obviously one of the best ballers in the league that averages 26.5. So he's a very good player, obviously. They have good depth players, and Royce O'Neal, great defender. Ilyasova can play off the bench. Favors is a very good guy for the room that can still do some stuff for you. And then Rudy Gobert is one of the best double-double defending centers in the league. So, and rebounding, obviously, averages a double-double. So I think the Jazz would honestly be my second team right now just because of circumstance. Obviously, coming into the season, I did not expect myself to say that I think two of the top teams that are contenders in the West are the Jazz and Sun. But, here we are. Both have to give them credit is because they defined a point guard that was a veteran and went, this guy is going to help our group in a leadership capacity and on the court play make through the youngsters capacity. And that's what both Mike Conley and Chris Paul have done for their respective teams to get them to where they're at right now and actually put them in the top of the
exactly
them in the
You
top
know.
2. So if I had to rank order there, I would go Clippers first just because of experience. You have Kawhi on your team. You won with the I'm gonna say the Pelicans. You won with the Raptors. And then the Pelicans haven't won anything in years. Their fans would be elated if they won with it. If you
Yeah,
won with
right.
that.
I was gonna say, yeah.
And then I would put the Jazz second right now, just because you do have, like, Rudy Gobert's been in the league for a good bit, and Mitchell's one of those players, even as a young player, almost reminds you of a guy that's been in the league for like 10 years already, just from how confident and
he's young.
Yeah, and
yeah, he's young.
Well, getting his stuff done, similar to Tatum, who is a big success story in Boston, even in a year they're not doing as good as I think their fans overall hoped. But I would go with that. I would go Clippers, Jazz. This one depends on health. If Davis is at 80%, the Lakers are third because of just you have the LeBron Davis effect. If not, I would actually probably put the Suns third and then put the Lakers fourth at that point.
Okay.
They might even be a little bit more iffy, kind of right there with Denver if Anthony Davis ain't playing or is out. So I would say the West is a little bit more of a crapshoot right now of a bunch of teams that we're going to have to really watch in these final weeks of the season, final month almost of the season, since it is the 14th and the season is supposed to end on the 16th, so a month and 2 days, and what they're able to do here. Because I think that's how, as we do our show coming into the stretch run, I would rank it as time goes on. If the Jazz and Suns stay hot, and then say AD and LeBron come back for cups of coffee, if AD clearly does not look by the end of the season healthy, then I'm going to
obviously have to change that.
Opinions. If he does, then I might put the Lakers higher. So
now they're only taking the top 6, right?
No, they're doing, you get in automatically as that, then 7 through 10 as play-ins to see who gets the last spots. That's how they're doing it this year. So that's why when I explained the Sixers and Nets, I said I think either team should be able to beat either Charlotte, the Knicks, the Pacers, or the Bulls.
Yeah. Okay, so how does this whole thing work now? So at the end of the year,
more of a question. Stay tuned for that for Sunday's show. Andrew can explain that better than me. I'm not as in depth with.
Okay, because doesn't make sense. But all right, well,
and see who gets in from the 7 through 10 to be the playoff team. But I don't know why they decided to do that. I think it was just for extra pizzazz this year. But
because they're only playing 70 games.
10 games makes a difference if you're like, basically, if it ends like it is now. The Bulls not as much, 14.5 to 9.5, but 11.5 games to 9.5 games. Playing a couple games to try to play in would make a difference then. So I think it is probably for that reason. You're probably right on that. But if you didn't have anything else to go to for the NBA,
no, man.
I think we wrapped that up pretty good for your basketball. You think are your top contenders there. I hope everyone enjoyed that. And I also have to remember to say this in the video more. If you enjoy what we're doing, please like, comment, and subscribe to Steel's channel, Steel Flyers, and also the Sports Phanatic news page, my channel. We're trying to get to 140 as soon as we can. I think it's at 128 now. I got a subscriber yesterday. So we're going up a little bit, and we really appreciate your support. But now we're getting into, once my computer enjoys loading, NFL mock drafts and who we think could go to our teams. I do not want a 7th round mock draft. Give me an actual mock draft.
I have to say this. I've been a little bit kind of a wait and see what's going to happen here with the NFL. The league year started, and there was some free agency moves took place, and some different faces in some new places. You know what I mean? And so this draft, I think, is going to be rather interesting because you got a lot of teams right now seem to be jockeying for those top three or four picks right now. You know what I mean? And so I don't know, man. I've been looking at some of these mock drafts, and I just, gosh,
Well, I think the first is obvious.
Yeah, I
feel
think
like
that's
the first is going to be Trevor to Jacksonville.
yeah. Even though they are probably will, I have a feeling that Jacksonville is probably gonna deal Gardner Minshew.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, so that they'll be able to bring this quarterback in here, Trevor Lawrence. So they also made some moves in the offseason to bring some folks in there to Jacksonville as well to help out too. But yeah, that I think is a foregone conclusion. Trevor Lawrence, quarterback to the Jacksonville Jaguars. But San Francisco moved up. The Jets moved around. The Patriots moved around. The Bengals moved around to get to some of these. The Miami moved around. You know, they made some trades so they could get higher in the draft.
Yeah, and I think a lot of them, some of those teams are for different reasons. It does seem like when you look at a lot of mocks, your top three might be quarterbacks, where I think the Jets are also, it seems like they're heavily leaning towards Zach Wilson, especially after the Darnold trade. So I feel like Zach Wilson is most likely going to go to the Jets, which is the guy that most people, other than Trevor Lawrence, because he's basically the Mahomes guy in the draft, that's the unicorn. But other than him, you have Wilson would probably be the arm talent guy. So there are some reported off the field and injury issues with him, but I feel like that's more in the realm of like just settle him down mature wise, like the Browns did with Baker, rather than it is like Ryan Leaf or anything. Like I don't think he's anywhere near that. I think it's more he just needs to be the dude that comes in after a year or two, like we saw with Mayfield in Cleveland. This year he actually matured, and when he would lose would blame himself and not other people, which is
let's hope.
I think you see. For Wilson just seems like he's a very good quarterback. I don't think I have to worry about that too much to begin. But I think that's the guy that might be able to fix it for the Jets, just because he's also a guy that seems to get rid of the ball, at least from watching him a little bit at BYU highlights. Fairly quick when the rush is coming, which is obviously something the Jets obviously need to have on their team because their offensive line usually sucks. So,
well, okay, see, now that's going to be the thing. That's going to be the thing with the Jets. Okay, this goes straight back to this not being the guy that the current regime picked. And that's the only reason why Sam Darnold's going away, because if you look at the ratings, you look at the size, you look at the same kind of quarterback that Zach Wilson is, that's kind of the same kind of guy that Sam Darnold is. 6'2", 214 pounds. Sam Darnold's a little taller, right? And I think has a little bit more of an arm, I think, than Wilson does. You know what I'm saying? But it's one of those things. You know what I mean? It's like you didn't get to pick the quarterback, so you don't like him, so you're going to pick your guy. So you trade away Sam Darnold so you can get your guy. And that's all I think is going on here with the Jets, quite frankly. You know what I mean? I honestly, I think Sam Darnold is a good quarterback.
No, I think he is too. I think it's just at this point it's best for him to go somewhere else, and it's best for the Jets to go somewhere else, just because you kind of put him in that
exactly
bad spot at this point.
I mean, the kid was running for his life. I mean, you know, they had no offensive line there for him. They had no run game. They had nobody to throw the ball to. They're kind of doing the same thing here with Zach Wilson. Now, they did kind of go out and get some stuff in the free agency market, but for the most part, you know, they better draft well.
Yeah, you would hope they need to obviously address. They have Keenan Cole. They have Cole, the guy that if he can stay healthy, is pretty good. From the Jaguars now on the Jets, and then Crowder, who's obviously good if he can stay healthy. But beyond, and if Denzel Mims develops, I guess. But beyond them, they don't have the most consistent guys you look to say, oh yeah, they're going to consistently
right.
throw to those guys. But I do think, yeah, it makes sense. That makes sense to me. They're a team. They wanted to get their own cat in the house rather than having somebody else's. And Darnold's going to go on to a team that it seems like he'll probably have better success with in the Carolina Panthers and be able to kind of get, or
I
not the
like that move.
or
I
no,
really
was it Carolina or
Sam Darnold. Now you're going to make me have to look it up now. I thought it was to Carolina.
I thought it was too. They just didn't change the roster sheet, I don't think.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. All right. We were right. We just had to double check. I'm glad we do that, though. I'm glad we double check to make sure so that we get the correct and truthful information out there. I really like that move with going to Carolina because I think that gives Carolina a really decent quarterback now to go along with McCaffrey and to get that team where they need to go. Okay. I just like that move. I really like that move. I don't think that Teddy Bridgewater is the guy or was the guy there in Carolina anyway. You know what I mean? So I like Sam Darnold there in Carolina. I think that's going to be a good move for them, at least. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of other things too here with the next cat on the list, which is going to be Mac Jones. He's the other quarterback that is on the list, and he's from Alabama.
Maybe. I would think Justin Fields will get picked before Mac.
You think?
Yeah, because in most mocks, Justin Fields projected to either the 49ers or if the Falcons want to move on from Matt Ryan. That's the bigger question there.
Right. Or Denver, maybe.
Yeah, or Denver. If he goes to Denver, if he drops at Denver, they'll probably snag him. But I feel like Fields will go before Jones, and then Jones will go after. In this mock, they don't have Jones going. They actually have Lance going to Denver, so they have him going before.
Well, either way you slice it, I think San Francisco is going to be in the market for a quarterback, and Denver is definitely in the market for a quarterback. Okay? So no matter how you slice it, either one of those two teams is either going to get Mac Jones and or Justin Fields. Right?
Yeah, this one actually has Jones going, or Trey Lance, because Trey Lance is another quarterback that a lot of people like from North Dakota for the bigger upside. Where Mac Jones is more, you just know what he is. He probably, his upside's probably kind of where it's at, because he's more of a pocket passer and just a game manager.
Right.
You kind of know what you're getting from the forefront, where usually those guys drop, and then the guys that you like for their potential future talent, like the Lances of the world, usually are the guys that go.
Now the mock draft that I'm looking at, right, has quarterbacks going in the first four, right? So they got Jacksonville taking Lawrence, they got the Jets taking Wilson, the 49ers taking Jones, and they got the New England taking Trey Lance.
So they got New England trading all the way up to there.
Yeah. So
they did one of those mock drafts that they write and throw in a bunch of
trades and yeah. So this is a trade from the Falcons.
Okay. So because the Falcons would have fourth, which is where a lot of people have them picking Kyle Pitts, because he's the receiver, tight end guy that can easily play receiver or tight end just because he's too fast. He's so fast of a tight end. So that's who they have him going with. Yeah, I mean, that could happen. I think it's kind of odd. I never really loved unless if you maybe do a couple, but when people write the whole mock drafts with a crap ton of trades, I never really like that because I think it's
it makes it really hard.
I think it's just more you trying to get clickbait at that point. Because a lot of that, there's never that many trades. There's usually a couple, but some people put it in when there's 4 different trades in the first round. You'd be like, yeah, that's probably not going to happen. But I do think in this mock draft, who they have Cincinnati going with, they do need to go with one of the linemen, and obviously at their pick, getting Penny Sewell would make sense. Being you want to protect Joe Burrow at all costs. coming back off his injury too. So I think getting someone like him would be the right pick if they keep that pick there for Cincinnati.
Right. The other team too that I think is going to potentially make maybe some moves. I mean, I think New England could make some moves. You know what I mean? You might
Maybe
see
New England might also think Mac Jones falls to them, depending how much they think he falls. Because in this mock,
well, they're picking 15th right now.
Yeah, because in this mock, he's not going before them. Like they could pick him in this mock where they're at.
Yeah.
They just decided to pick Zaven Collins, the DN from Tulsa.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's how this mock has him going, because I'm scrolling down. It has him going somewhere between 17 to 32.
Yeah. Okay. Man. So now we talked about a bunch of the other teams here that we feel potentially could have some other things going on here. So let's I wanted to focus in on the Eagles.
Chicago.
The Eagles.
Chicago.
Yeah.
Town is getting Mac Jones at 20 according to
that one.
Because they have Dalton and they have Foles. So the thing starts with the Bears can't be serious with having Andy Dalton as their starting quarterback in 2021. But Jones is somebody that could come in and compete for that job. Both Nick Foles and Andy Dalton out there. So it seems like that would be something that could make sense for the Bears to go with him if he falls with them. It also makes sense for New England to pick him if he's still there at 15 too. So I wouldn't be surprised if they pick him at 15.
Right. So now your Eagles, right? You guys made some trades and moved up in the draft, right? That whole trade thing around there with Miami got you.
We ended up moving back in the draft actually.
Or Matt moving back. Okay, I'm sorry. So you're at 12th now. All right. You got rid of Carson Wentz. You brought in Flacco. You're going with Jalen Hurts, right? You lost some receivers. Yeah, you lost some receivers in Aguilar and Jackson, right? Who you guys picking, man?
Most mocks if he drops, it kind of depends where the receivers go, because some people, when you listen to them, think Jalen Waddle's the higher pop guy because you haven't seen everything from him yet, where a lot of people think Devontae is going to be very good in the NFL, but he's where he's at. He's going to come and be very good and probably stay there. Where a lot of people think Waddle's a guy that'll come in, be pretty good, and then just keep getting better, but then potentially become like Julio, I think. So I think it'll depend what guy falls. I'm perfectly fine with if either of those two fall to the Eagles, taking one of Devontae Smith, or if somehow Jamar Chase doesn't go top 10 and then fall. Obviously that would work, but I just don't see that being as much of a, because he's the guy that a lot of people went. That's Julio. That could be Julio Jones part 2. So I don't see him falling. But if someone of Smith or Waddle fall, Waddle's the guy that a lot more people have projected is falling. But either of those two are people I would go with, because you need wide receivers to bring in for Jalen Hurts. And Hurts is also a huge fan of Waddle, who he thinks will have the best career in the 2021 NFL draft. Hurts actually answered that was Jalen Waddle. So if he's there and the Eagles don't pick him, then they're stupid. So let's just get that out in the open before we start. Because the quarterback's already a big fan of him. He has chemistry before he walks into the building. You're literally stupid if you don't pick somebody that is already instant chemistry. If he's not there, then there's a couple people. The O tackle, I don't know a lot of them, but I've read about him in some mock that projected for the Chargers. The USC guy, Vera Tucker. It seems like they said he played really well at left tackle for the Trojans, and the Eagles, obviously with Peters aging, not having guys step up at the left tackle position since he's aged, that might be a pretty good asset to bring on. It's just I don't know as much about him personally. I just know from reading stuff. But if he's as good as these people say, and he decided to opt back in, and that really benefited him opting back into USC for this final year and really showing up and showing out, he seems to have the right mindset and the right goods for what the Eagles could need if there isn't the receiver they want there anymore. Or maybe that guy from V-Tech,
Christian Darrisaw.
Yeah, Darrisaw is also a guy
6'5", 314 pounds. Yeah, I wouldn't mind having him.
He's a guy you could get as well. So there's a couple linemen I would think would probably be the next guys, just because I think your cornerbacks at that point, unless if you're picking Caleb Farley at 12, are probably not going to be there anymore, looking at a couple of the mocks that I pulled up while we were here. So going off of that, I would say if Waddle or Smith's still there, or Vera Tucker or Darrisaw. And then, I mean, Caleb Farley is a guy that's interesting because he opted out of the 2021 season. He probably would be higher if he didn't. He just has some injury concerns, which is more why I want the Eagles. The Eagles haven't hit very good in the past when it came to people having some injury concerns coming out of the draft. So I'd rather just go with the guys I said because of that. I think his skill set's fine. I just when I see guys that have injury history with the Eagles, they haven't had good luck in the past.
I'm with you. I like all the selections that you have there for the Eagles. I think that gives them a pretty good balance as far as some guys that they can select and some needs that they're definitely going to have, you know what I mean, for this year. The Eagles were definitely on the outside looking in this past season, and any help that they can get for Jalen Hurts, whether it be protection or whether it be somebody for him to throw the ball to, would be great. And any size that Philadelphia could get on the defensive side of the ball, especially on their line, and then especially with their covers, I think that would be also very helpful for Philadelphia as well too. Well,
they made a smart pickup of bringing in the kid from well, not a kid, but the guy from Minnesota, and Eric Wilson. Good. We had a guy come in Singleton, who was one of the lone bright spots, emerged as a good linebacker all of a sudden for the Eagles last year, and now you have Wilson coming in, so you can have a couple guys there.
Exactly.
Obviously, another interesting name would be if Parsons somehow falls to the Eagles with the Eagles debate.
See, now hold your roll there, Mister. Hold your roll there, Mister. Now you're starting to pull too many names out of here away from some of the. That's who I was going to talk about for the Steelers, because I think he could potentially fall to the Steelers, and that would be a really good pick. He also opted out of the season this past year for Penn State.
Yeah, okay. Which is what has him a little bit lower. Yeah.
Right.
Same
so
with Farley, yeah.
Right. Yeah. I like Farley as well too. Caleb Farley. I thought he would be a good cornerback. I think he'd be a good pickup for the Steelers.
This actually has you picking a corner. I don't know if you know. I don't know much about this guy. Aaron Robinson from UCF is a big corner, 6'1", 193, who tackles well. It says they could target the best secondary player available with this pick, is what Walter Football thinks would be the case.
Yeah, I would not have a problem with that. But that's kind of where I put like Parsons in there, because I think he would be a really good fit in Pittsburgh. Okay, and he also.
I feel like you might have to trade up a bit for him, though. Most mocks I saw had him in the teens, but yeah, if you could get him there, that would be great. But I guess
especially
the reason I
with
brought
losing...
that up is my follow-up question is, would you trade up for him?
Yeah, I would probably trade up for him. I would trade up for somebody like that, especially after losing Bud Dupree. Now, we do have Alex Highsmith. We drafted him last year, and then we also got Bush coming back, okay? And we did re-sign Spillane, okay? And we also have a couple of depth guys there as well with Williamson. And then we also have TJ, okay? But as we saw last year, our top 3 linebackers went down, and we were pretty much scurrying around. You know what I mean? And Pittsburgh historically is known for drafting linebackers because they play on special teams. You know what I mean? And we can convert. A lot of times we'll take a linebacker and convert them to a D end. You know what I mean? Or the other way around. We'll take a D end and convert him to a linebacker. You know what I mean? Pittsburgh needs offensive linemen. Okay, with Marquise Pouncey retiring and potentially Villanueva not being re-signed. Okay, they did get Finney re-signed back on the team, but we need to draft a young offensive lineman because I think DeCastro is probably not going to get re-signed as well. You know what I mean? So we're going to need some offensive linemen. I like this Rashawn Slater from Northwestern. I don't know if he's going to fall to us, but I would take that all day. That Christian Darrisaw, I wouldn't mind having him either. Really big dude, 6'5", 314 pounds, second overall in his rank on that position. I wouldn't mind having him either. As far as some of the other guys that we talked about as well, we could go for a running back. Pittsburgh might be the first team to take a running back off the board this year. I've been seeing that guy Najee, I think his name is. And I think he's either from Alabama or USC or somewhere. I can't remember where he's from, but they've been kind of looking at him for that. You know what I mean? So Pittsburgh has a lot of needs, and new offensive coordinator now, new quarterbacks coach, new defensive backs coach. Okay, so there's some new coaching going on in there, and then we lost a lot of our back end. We lost Hilton. We lost Nelson. Okay, so we also need a cornerback or a safety or somebody back there to help out Edmonds. You know what I mean? So,
well, this interestingly, speaking of trades, the CBS one has the Packers giving you their first rounder at 29, a third at 92 for number 24, and a fourth rounder at 140, so they could get Greg Newsome, the second, who's the D-back, and then.
Yeah.
With your pick, you would get Alex Leatherwood, who's the offensive lineman from Alabama, who's ranked seventh as an offensive lineman according to this.
Yeah,
37th overall. We could name any other need for Pittsburgh in his draft. Leatherwood can play guard or tackle, but has the physical tools to settle in at tackle over the long haul if that is what is needed.
Exactly, and he has that big body. He's 6'6". You know what I mean? 312 pounds. He's got that big body. Plus, he played for Alabama. I'll take any Alabama lineman all day.
I wonder if you would have interest with this one guy, because this one guy's ranked the first edge rusher, and he went to state. Jason Owa, who had last
Any
season.
Penn State boy, bring him.
Well, last season he didn't have the sacks, but they said it's hard to turn him away because of his remarkable pro day and just the skill he has and athletic ability.
He's also really good at run stopping. He's also really good at eating up double teams, okay? Because that's what he basically did at Penn State. You know what I'm saying?
He's very big for an edge rusher. So you talked about converting former edge rushers to play some of your linebacker position. He seems like the athletic guy that would fit into that Steelers mindset.
Exactly. You know who else I would really like to see the Steelers look at too is another Penn State guy. Is that Fairmouth, the tight end?
Oh
he's like Gronkowski. He's that same size, that same build. He's got that same kind of lumbering when he runs down the field. Like, he's not the fastest guy, you know what I mean? But he'll run you over.
That's why Kyle Pitts is the first.
Yeah.
Big, can catch anything, and he pretty much is Calvin Johnson at tight end.
Yeah, pretty as a tight end. Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean? So either one of those, I would love to see either one of those players land at Pittsburgh. Here's what I'm so tired of. Always what teams do is they take the quote unquote best athlete available. Well, in all the years that I've been watching football, and in all the years that we've been,
Najee Harris is who you were thinking of, by the way.
Najee Harris, that's it. All
the years
they
actually have you getting in this mock draft with.
I don't think so. We picked a running back last year, and even though James Conner signed with Arizona earlier this week, I think our running back room is just fine. Okay, I would much rather spend draft picks on other positions of need instead of the best athlete available. No, the best athlete available might not be somebody that's going to fit on our team. I want the best athlete available for the position of need.
Yeah, I think that is weird how teams tend to do that. It's with all sports. It's not just with football.
I don't get
It's not
it.
usually just with football, but I think you should just get what you need more. I mean, that's nipped for baseball. The Phillies and the Bucks trying to get a bunch of infielders to convert to outfielders, and then it
It
just
doesn't
doesn't
work.
do anything. So
Yeah, it doesn't
uh,
work.
I would say, well, you guys have who'd you draft last year as a running back?
McFarland.
Oh, okay. Because I was looking on here. Okay, Anthony McFarland. Okay,
Yeah,
because I
yeah.
was looking on here and it
Out
has
of
Snell
Maryland.
listed. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
And then we have Samuels and oh gosh, there's another guy too, and I can't think of his.
Benny Snell Jr.
Snell.
Here and
Yep.
Galen Belland.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So because we picked one up.
That was Belland, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Right. And then Pittsburgh also got that. What was his name? Dwayne Haskins from Washington.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
He was.
And they have Rudolph still. Yeah.
Right, and Rudolph, and then Ben. Right, and then we re-signed Juju for 1 year. So we got Juju, Claypool, Deontay, and Washington, Jay Wash. Right. So. Good receiving core, and then we got two. Now, Vance McDonald just retired just this past season. So we got Eric Ebron. We need a tight end.
Yeah, unless if now sometimes tight ends are those positions the random dude steps up that you don't expect before the
well
just from playing.
For the last 2 years, Pittsburgh has had tackle eligible. Right. And Zach Banner has been that player for us for the last 2 years, except he got hurt last year. So, but he's going to be our starting tackle this year. So we need another tackle eligible tight end.
Unless if you have that Edmonds guy or Kevin Rader, who I don't know anything about, or Zach Gentry, who is 6'8".
Yep.
So maybe you can do something with him.
Zach Gentry stepped in. He was the tight end that we drafted last year. Okay, so he needs to step up and play because now Vance McDonald's not there. So and team up with Eric Ebron.
6'8", 262.
So. How you doing? Right. So and he was. So we got some guys to throw the ball to. Let's throw the ball to him and let's have some protection because Pittsburgh needs offensive line. They need some defensive backfield, and they need some linebackers. So that's what I would like to see Pittsburgh take. And I don't care if they trade up or trade down to get whoever they need to get, as long as it's the best player at that position.
Orland, actually, according to this sheet, is not that is actually pretty good size for his height. Because 208 at 5'8".
Speedy. He's got that. Oh my gosh! If you blink, he's gone. Speed.
Oh yeah, but like 208 at 5'8" is not a bad weight for trying to stay healthy when you're that small, because you have to find some way to stay healthy as that small of a running back. We're putting a comparison of his friend at running back Benny Snell's 5'10" and 224, so that's only
right.
It's not even that much more than so I think he definitely seems like he's a guy that has a chance at that. Maybe he'll become a Sproles.
Who knows? Who knows?
Quick pass catcher type guy there. But did you have any other guys you wanted to shout out that you could potentially get for the draft for your Steelers, or did that pretty much wrap it up for you?
Yep, that pretty much wraps it up, man.
Yeah, for me, the only one other guy I named just because he's Joe Horn's son, it might be a good chance to him to actually be good. Is you have J.C. Horn out there as a cornerback, 6'1", 205. I wouldn't mind if the Eagles, he's projected a little bit lower, so I wouldn't be surprised if the Eagles trade down again to get more assets and then draft him if they drafted him more at like 17 or something like that. But he is a guy that I think would fit unique corners. He would also probably fit what the Steelers also potentially could use too from the corner position. So that's a guy that might be able to fit both of our teams. But I think when it comes to rounding out the podcast for us today for the Sports Phanatic Sportscast, we're getting to the MLB and teams that have come out of the gate hot thus far. And then if we think those teams are going to be able to stay there, if we think the divisions will kind of balance themselves out. One of the more interesting things early on when it comes to baseball is how are we looking on time, by the way?
Yeah, we're good.
We're good? Okay.
Yeah, we should be wrapping up here soon, though.
Okay. With baseball is the Indians obviously moved on from people. They got rid of Frenchie Lindor. They got rid of Carlos Carrasco. They also got rid of what's that guy's name? Mike Clevenger last season to go to the Padres, who's not pitching this season due to injury, but will be back. And they're still right now, albeit in a division that everybody knows is not one of the best in baseball for who's going to have the best record to win it. But at 6-4, in first place in that division and looking pretty good thus far. It's going to be interesting if that lasts from the Indians. I think Chris Rose, who's an Indians fan, who I've always liked as a baseball fan, kind of summed it perfectly. This team's going to compete in a lot of games because of their pitching rotation, but their offense is going to leave a lot to be desired in most of those games now that you don't have Frenchie and you have Perez and Hedgie, who Perez started hitting for you a bit, but both of those guys are still more of fielding, game manager catchers, which is all you need. From the catching position, I think a lot of people overrate catchers and think everybody's JT Realmuto or Yasmani Grandal, which is not the case. But the main job of a catcher is to be the kind of quarterback, your bullpen and rotation. You have to know so much in your head to be able to manage the staff of your bullpen and rotation and know the hitter's tendencies. It's almost just an added bonus when you're also great at hitting. A catcher
exactly
needs to be very good at doing those things, and then if you get the extra, you get the extra. But they've been getting the reason why this team's been doing good recently is mainly, obviously, their pitching's been good. They did bring in a guy that's going to be interesting to look at. He's only hitting .238 in the young season, but if Ahmed Rosario, who they got in the Lindor trade, that's the other reason I wanted to bring up the Indians, is able to get going and be the prospect the Mets thought they would have, be one of those, not power hitting, but just good hitting, fielding shortstops that can utilize his speed pretty well. If he can do that, Jose Ramirez, who normally gets off a little bit slow like he is this year and then just goes absolutely ridiculous later on. If he can do that and Ramirez can do his thing and be in the MVP race as time goes on, they also have Jimenez, who's a top prospect but struggling a bit, so maybe needs a little bit more time. This team just has a lot of guys that are kind of guys that you think might need a little bit more time to develop in Rosario and Jimenez to kind of get where you want them. And then they have Ramirez mixed in. You got Cesar from the Phillies, who's a good role player. So do they have a chance? Yeah, but I still think this is a team, if they're going to make it, they're going to make it purely based off of the pitching because all those guys I named, other than one guy in Eddie Rosario, have below a .250 batting average to start the season. Ramirez is going to bring it up because he's an MVP candidate. He always starts off slow. But those other guys, you just need to wait for them to develop, and I think the Indians are about a year away from really winning it, where I think your best favorite, usually for most people, is the team that started out 5-5, which is on a 3-game losing streak to get them back to 500. Is the Twins, I think, is where most people had the vision going, because you just have a team, your catcher, when he's at his best, and Garver does hit a bit down there. You obviously brought in Donaldson, who's out now, which is effective. But when Josh Donaldson's in, he's a good masher. You got Jorge Polanco. They brought in Andrelton Simmons to really help with the fielding, and he's hitting .355 to start the season, doing great down there. So if he keeps doing that, he fits in well. Buxton took a little bit longer than they expected, but now is coming into his own. Kepler is a very good player that somebody, I think it was DeRosa, compared him to Grady Sizemore. That actually fits. Just kind of goes out there, plays, will run through a brick wall. So that's that makes sense there. So they got the team Nelson Cruz is a guy that just gets better with age, even though he's 40-something. He still could probably hit 40-something home runs to match his age. So he's a guy that does really well still. I would still put them, even looking at the way this has been started, as the outset favorite of the division, where I'm still not changing my second place, though, just because they're 5-4 in the last 10. They have looked good. I like their developing guys in the rotation. Danny Duffy has started off really good. Through 2 starts, he has a .75. Brad Keller hasn't started off as hot, obviously, but he'll get going. He's on to a slow start. I still like, because of the young guy Singer, and also just because I think Duffy's going to have a bounce back year, and other pitchers they have as youngsters will come up and pitch well. But I like the addition of Minor, too. I still think that Royals team is going to be the team, along with the White Sox, that is still right there. But I do think this Central Division is literally going to be a division if you're not the Tigers, who are in it right now, but they'll fall off eventually. They're the outlier.
Right.
The top 4 might be within 5 games. Like, I don't think anybody's going to run away. This division doesn't have a runaway outlier. So I think you're going to have the top 4, honestly, be within, I wouldn't be shocked, 5 games of each other. And the Tigers are like 10 to whatever, out by the end of the season as they go back to balancing out and being the Tigers, just like how Baltimore got off to a 5-6 pretty decent start. They always go back and balance out. They usually actually get off the decent starts in seasons.
Right.
So I think that division's likely to just be within 5 in the top 4, but it's exciting how they're starting. The Royals are definitely showing that they are here to compete this year. They brought in some very good players to help them out. Elvis Andrus, Carlos Santana. I mean, they also were able to bring in to help out as well. Not hitting as good yet, but had a decent big home run the other day. So if he can get going, that would help. You brought in Andrew Benintendi. You brought in Michael Taylor, who's a great fielder and thrower, had outfield assisted very good in their first game of the season, and still doing good in 306. Plus Soler. I think they have a good team to compete. All these teams, the White Sox, have been better than I've expected. I think La Russa's mixed in with young guys and gelled with them a little bit better than I would have first thought. So good for him when it comes to that. This is a division that's tough to pick. I'm just going to keep rolling with the team I had in first to start the season when I did my projections on up. I guess I'll still stay with the Twins, but I still think this division's within 5 games for the top 4, because the Central, ironically for both leagues, is a division that I don't think many teams other than the last place team are going to be the odd out or good pull away. And the NL Central is the same way. The Reds have started 7-4. They look good, but they have some question marks. The Cardinals probably have the most complete roster, started 6-5, and then you got the Brewers. Because of Yelly bouncing back, I think, and the youngster Keston Hero, who I really like, and the fact that Corbin Burns, they always explain this on MLB Central, which is a show they kind of replicate, like show you guys and how they change themselves, kind of like NHL Now. We'll run through it and explain how the guys have got better over time.
Okay.
He changed his delivery and changed the way he pitches to be able to now become effective like he is. So it seemed like he has the right mindset. He started as hot as Duffy, a .73 in the first couple games. You have some good guys out there. You obviously have good bullpen guys, and Williams is one of the better guys. Same with Josh Hader. You have Brandon Woodruff. They seem to just Freddie Peralta ain't bad either, obviously, if he's able to now hone himself into a starter.
Yeah, right.
So I still would go with, just because you have the guy that I think is going to bounce back and be in the MVP race again. Kevin Millar picked him as the home run king, so that would help my prediction even better. I'm still going to stick with the Brewers here. I like the Colton Juan addition too. He got injured now with his oblique, but when he comes back, he can play second for you. He can play the outfield. He can play wherever you want him to play. They got another good prospects in Luis Ariz on that team. I think this team's just going in the right direction with veterans like Locane, Avisail Garcia, and Bradley on their team. It just seems like they're pushing in the right direction. So I would say it's going to be them or the Cardinals to win this division when it all said and done at the season. But to start the season, it's definitely where you want to see these teams. I think you envision the Cubbies kind of falling back a little bit. probably being that team that might end in fourth within the 5 to 7.
Yeah.
And I think the first 3 teams in this division will also be within 3.5 to 4 games of each other, because both central divisions are not the most immense with talent, like popping off. Like you go, okay, well, the NL East and the AL East have 2 divisions where you just look at the firepower of some of the teams, where these teams are more, they're just everybody groups themselves together as a full team effort type thing. For a lot of these central teams, they don't have as many outliers, minus you have Yelich and you have now Arenado on the Cardinals, and a couple guys on the Reds. But I think these divisions are going to be the closest in baseball, and that's why they'll be exciting to watch. But that's definitely going to be how it goes. Where the NL East is one that'll still be close to my Phillies division, that the Phillies are now tied with the Mets. In first place coming into tonight, 4-3 to 6-5 after losing the doubleheader. I still think the Phillies, they started off the season well. I still think the Mets and Braves, like I said before the season, are ahead of us. I would still say the Phillies are more of your third-ish team. The Nationals are doing Nationals things again, and seem to still be caught in a hangover 2 years later. So if they can get going in the right direction, they have the team on paper to get going in the right direction. The Braves are going to get going. They have 2 talented teams. I think you're likely to see the Marlins in fourth when all is said and done.
Okay.
Either us or Atlanta, depending who the Mets beat up on more, in third. And then the other team in second, because I think the Mets, with the acquisitions they made, will win the NL East. So I feel like it's whoever the Mets beat up on the most will then put down third place. So it's going to depend on if the Phillies, after losing the 2 at home but doing good in their first series against the Mets at CBP, can answer back and do good against the Mets, or the Braves, who probably have, like I said, the more complete team to better against the Mets. So I would favor the Braves to be in second, the Phillies to be in third. But I think it is going to depend on who the Mets beat up on more, and that's going to be the factor that makes that the case by the end of the season. But I'm happy with what I've seen from our pitching when it comes to the bullpen and all that from the Phillies. The Phillies just need to see the offense get going. When it comes to that. But I do think that's one of the most talented overall divisions in the sport, with those top 3 teams. You every time you throw on an MLB show, they're talking about the NL East, it seems. So definitely one of the more prominent divisions to talk about. When it comes to the West, the Rockies are already an outlier, so they're not even competing early on, let alone as time goes on. The Arizona Diamondbacks are a team I thought would be a little bit more in it. They've competed in some games a little bit more, but they're only 4-8. I wouldn't be surprised if they come back to being a little bit more 500, as I don't see them getting in, though. The Giants, again, get off to a pretty good start at 7-4, being right behind the Padres and Dodgers at 8-4, 9-2. If the Giants, with their veterans and the guys they have on their staff, and keep doing this, and Buster Posey decided that taking off a year for him was the best thing since sliced bread, then they are a team that could be in third. I don't see that. They're probably the most likely team to be in third place. The problem with this division is nobody's passing the Padres and nobody's passing the Dodgers. So you're just at this point going, cool, we're going to be pretty good third place.
Yeah.
Where if that's what gets you into the wild card, great. The only problem is guess who you're playing. Whatever team doesn't win your division. So
might not be in a big hurry to do that.
Yeah, that's why I think the Giants are in a really tough spot. But Kapler has done significantly better, it seemingly. I'm not in San Francisco, obviously, but seemingly has done better with the Giants, learning from his mistakes he had in Philly than he obviously did in Philadelphia.
Exactly.
So it seems like in his second job that's working good, and the Giants are moving in the right direction, but they're not competing with let's be honest, they're not competing with unless Joey Bart comes up and turns into the next coming of Mike Piazza in his second stretch up. They're not Dodgers. And And the Padres, I mean. And Joey Bart should be a great catcher, but he's not going to be Mike Piazza. Most people aren't going to be Mike Piazza.
Right.
Also, local area product for those that don't know, Norristown right there for Mikey. But as we wrap up here with our baseball, we'll go into the AL. We already did the AL Central because I wanted to start with the Central divisions just because of how they're so wacky, and there's just all these middle market teams that are starting to try to spend a little bit more but still don't know how to fully spend. So you have all, just logged up, jammed competitiveness in those divisions. Where with the AL West, the Athletics actually remembered how to play baseball recently and on a 4-game streak after forgetting how to do that for the first week of the season. So they're a team that should be in the race. The Mariners right now are in it. I feel like the Mariners might be a team that more are fourth place this year, showing good signs because you got Giles for your future. You knew he would be out this year. You obviously
out for the whole year.
Ty France for now and the future. You signed Evan Wright for now and the future. You have Lewis for now and the future. Brian Trammell for now and the future. So this team, I think, was planning is what we're trying to get better this year, compete more, and then next year and the years further are really when we're going to try to start being in wild card contention and working our way up there. So I see them being more eventually settling in between third and fourth, but I just see the A's being the team, if everybody can actually stay on the field, that will be able to surpass them just from the experience of being able to always find ways to win. The A's are that team that you always just have some random guy eventually. And then they start doing really well. Like it was Montes in, I think that was 18 or 19 before his suspension with steroids. And same sense. But they always have different guys step up for them. So I think that'll happen again, and you'll get them to move up. The Stros still look good. They'll be up there somewhere. But this is the year. I'm going to stick with it. They're starting pretty good this year. Ohtani wasn't able to go as deep as I would want, but I have liked the movement and all the things I saw when he was pitching, and he hit a freaking home run when he was pitching too, so that works out. I think if Cobb can even just pitch to a 4.5, 4.6, be that fifth starter, that's all they need from him. If you can have other guys pitch as you fully hope they can actually get to. You need Canning to develop him into what you hope he can be. But you are getting what you want. Bundy started the year pretty good again. I think this is a team that is going to continue to do well and just be able to potentially win this division and finally have what baseball fans have been wanting for a while, Mike Trout.
How about that?
As a division winner and not somebody that can just get eliminated in one game.
I
think that's a good chance of that happening this year. When it comes to the East, as we close out our divisions, the Red Sox lost their first 3 games, then proceeded to go, you know what's great? Winning 7. So weird way to get to 7-3. But
okay.
Whatever works.
Right.
Boston's such an odd team. I said this in the past, being them as my second team. They're stink. Like I told John, they'll be back. They're like the Flyers. Like they'll make the playoffs, miss, make. Like the back and forth years you tend to. That will be Boston, where last year they were a dumpster fire. Yeah. And then all of a sudden this year everything's going in the right direction, and you're like, oh, wait a minute. But it's still too early to say anything. I still think they're more the team. I had it Yankees, Jays, Red Sox. If I had to peg right now, the Jays are still in this weird, we're playing in Florida, then we might play in Buffalo next month. Stretch, figuring out where the heck their home even is. So, but I think they're a team that's still really good. They brought in the right assets. They brought in the people they need. They're a team that's going to compete with Boston all season. It's going to depend if Pearson and other guys for them can stay healthy, along with Ryu, along with the guys like Stripling they brought in. If those guys can stay healthy, same with Chatwood, who's injured already, then they can compete with Boston. If they keep getting banged up, then I would say then it might be Yankees, Red Sox, and then your Rays. But that's going to be another division that I think is good in the top 4. I do feel eventually, though, if the Yankees are fully healthy, unfortunately, they might have the best chance of pulling ahead of it at some point. But Boston's the weird team. You never know. They're just a team that somehow bring it all together in some years where they just get a run and they just stay hot and then don't stop. When they have players they can do that, it's just coming off of last year. You definitely did not expect this good of a start after having a sweep in the first thing. But I would still favor the Yankees, I would say, for right now. But that would about wrap up our baseball coverage.
Good deal, man. I'm excited for this season because I think next year is going to be a whole different story for baseball because of the CBA not being in place and things like that. So I think this year is going to have to be the year where baseball is going to have to try to put its best foot forward. You know what I mean? And try to do its best to try to be there for the fans and try to put a good product out on the field, because I have a feeling that things are going to fall apart here at the end of the year. Just my gut feeling.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. They have the CBA. It doesn't seem like it'll be too easy when they get there. So, yeah, there is a chance of a lockout. But this season's going good. They'll figure it out.
I hope they do.
But, yeah, that's something we're obviously talk about in future episodes as the season ends near, and that actually happens in the off season. But I want to thank everybody that joined us today for joining us. We appreciate your support. I want to obviously thank Steel for co-hosting with me, and I want to thank you all for joining. Please like, comment, and subscribe to Steel Flyers channel, to my Sports Fan News channel that I'll be posting this on after Steel posts it, and to Peyton on the Radio, Off the Wall Hockey, and Pure Low Wisdom, as well as Flyers Nitty Gritty. All great places you can find some good information on us, the game of hockey and all other sports there as well for the SteelFlyers.com website. Did you have any closing thoughts?
No, man, I'm good. We're all good. I do want to say thank you for our sponsor, www.cccresorts.com. Really appreciate all the support that you've been able to give us here at SteelFlyers.com, and really appreciate all the great information that they've been able to provide for us, and a great commercial that you guys get to watch and get to go to. So thank you very much for CCC Resorts for being our sponsor. Thank you very much.
Yep, we definitely thank you for that.
All right. Well, man, looks like another good one, and we'll catch you guys all on the next one, and take care.